So I have a question for Joseph. You mentioned the access to there's two large web indexes. What's the barrier to creating a new one?
Sorry, what?
What's the barrier to creating a new one? Why are those two that are?
Excellent question. I mean, so there are obviously costs involved in creating a web index. There are, it's a 5-minute talk, and I don't know if people saw, we've got a timer that was ticking down. There are all sorts of people working on alternatives to web indexes. So if anybody uses Brave has sort of its own index that it's been building. A really interesting announcement. There's a joint venture between Ecosia and Quant. They're two European, one French, one German search engine that are building indexes of French and German language web content. So there are all opportunities to build indexes. The reality is that Google has the best index by virtue of the fact that it's been doing this for the longest amount of time at this point compared to other search engines.
Is that because of PageRank or something else?
What do you mean? Sorry.
PageRank is the...
Yeah. I mean, the underlying core of their index, PageRank, this is what you learn after working at a search engine company for a couple of months. So we talk about like the algorithms that generate search results. That's oftentimes divorced from the underlying index. I like to think of an index as sort of, and this is an analogy from the Stone Age at this point, but like a phone book. Google has the best phone book. It has the best breadth and ability to map all sorts of corners of the internet. They have the ability to cut lots of deals to access sort of walled gardens. And they've also, because of the benefits of being listed in Google search, everybody wants them to crawl them. They have the sort of the best return on investment for third parties.
Hi, Jay Stanley from ACLU. My question's for you, Keith. When Community Notes fails, how does it fail? What are the failure modes? So you can't tell me that it succeeds every time.
Yeah, Community Notes isn't perfect. I think the best way to answer that is like, what do we hear from customers? Like, what are they wanting more out of it? When is it not working as well as they want? The biggest things we hear are they want notes faster. Like, like, can't you get this thing up there faster? I talked about Lightning Notes and like a re-architecture we did to try to make that happen. There are other things that we can do to make that happen as well. There's more to come on speed. Second one is, people want a note there and it's not showing up. And sometimes that's because the community hasn't yet found the note that's actually going to resonate with people from different points of view. As we scale the service with more contributors, it gets more possible to find those ideal notes for as many cases as possible. There may also be things that we can do, particularly with AI and LLMs, that might help with that as well. We worked on some research with the University of Washington on a paper that was just published called Supernotes. And the idea there was we take all the existing notes, you give them to an LLM, and it basically tries to generate a set of a better note from all the existing notes that might have broader appeal across the political spectrum. Has ways of like challenging itself to try to figure out like how to get it like to be neutral and informative in that way. And it has shown that it can, in a bunch of cases, outperform, like the super note can be better than the best of the original input notes. So there may be things like that can help close that gap as well.
Is it vulnerable at all to organized efforts to hack it?
It's not a general issue we've seen. Not to say that that is impossible. It's something that we keep an eye on. There are the classic internet attack is the brigade. Like you just get a bunch of people and you like try to post something up. We assumed from day one that this was going to be an attack. Like there's a famous Bodie McBoatface example. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but like the UK government was like, what should we name this boat? And of course the internet was like Bodie McBoatface. And so we knew this was going to happen. That it's designed to resist attacks like that. So the basic model of showing notes that are found helpful by people who normally disagree makes it very difficult to effectively pull off an attack like that. You'd have to have, like, relatively speaking, a large number of people, trying to do that. And there's a fundamental disincentive you'd have to have people effectively lying about their point of view. There's a fundamental disincentive to lie about your point of view in community notes, because for it to think you have a certain point of view, you have to have elevated content that aligns with that point of view. So you basically have to elevate a whole bunch of stuff you don't agree with in order to maybe get one win, which is not, just generally doesn't work that well. Or it's not very appealing to most people. And then when you consider also like there's many people out there contributing and rating these notes, we'd have to have like a larger input than the rest of, the contributors, which is tough. So not to say that can't happen, but we're very aware of it. We're always looking for ways to improve, robustness against those kind of attacks. We launched some stuff this summer against like looking for co-rating cliques, people who possibly co-rate together and downweighting their ratings. So we think it's relatively robust and always trying to improve it in that regard.
Hi, Tom Romanoff, the Association for Computing Machinery. A question for Andy. So a little bit of solving for X here, borrowing the current administration's priorities at the FTC, given that a bunch of tech companies signed on to the voluntary commitments for AI last year, is there an enforceability at the FTC considering it was essentially advertising for that policy apparatus?
Potentially under its deception authority. If AI companies signed up for some sort of guidelines that they were going to follow and then marketed those and said, this is how we build our technology. Here's all the ways in which our technology takes into account these sorts of commitments that we've made, and added some, just really marketed it and acted like it was, we stand behind these claims. The FTC could come in and investigate with an investigation, really pull the information about the systems and look at, do they actually perform the way these companies are claiming they are? Are they actually upholding these obligations that they've said that they're going to uphold? And if they haven't, they could bring an enforcement action for deceptive claims. And it would be similar to, the closest case I can think of would be the Do Not Pay case, where Do Not Pay said, our AI lawyer tool is 100% effective, and which was a marketing claim. And the FTC then launched an investigation and showed that their AI lawyer tool does not perform the same as human lawyers, and they actually had not run tests comparing the two. And so it was a marketing claim, but the FTC said it was deceptive. And something similar could be done with claims that they're building systems in a safe way or committing to certain guidelines and then not doing that. Thank you for the question.
Hi, I have a question for Maddie. My name is Joe Seibel. I'm from Addis. I just had a quick question. A lot of the AI talk that's been going on today is from the federal perspective, so I really appreciate the state perspective that you provided. And I think, obviously, communication with the public is super important and why states are taking this action. But my question for you is, what is sort of your vision about, or the idea, I guess, of states coordinating with private sector on private industry on these things? And then how do these state regulations, sort of a myriad thereof, I guess, pose issues for private industry when it comes to complying with these laws?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I will say that my focus at CDT is on the public sector, but I will say that a lot of the bills that we're seeing coming out of states attempts to do both, of regulating the private and the public sector. And I think that, at least from our perspective, I think ideally we would love to see different bills that I think tackle the private sector, public sector, because I think there's different resource constraints that like a public sector entity has that a private sector entity may not have. So yeah, I think that's what I would say about that.
Hi, this question is for Keith. I'm curious about basically within Notes, you were talking about basically one of the things you're optimizing for is non-polarizing information, right? Information that's agreed upon by both sides. And I'm curious how some topics can be covered that are polarizing, that are still true. So I'm thinking climate change is sort of a top one that I can think of, that certain sides may disagree with it, but the scientific community is pretty well settled on that topic. And I'm curious how that's handled within Notes.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would phrase our goal slightly differently. We are looking for notes that will inform understanding. And so doesn't mean the topic is not polarizing or controversial. Most notes are on topics that are super polarizing. Like it's on the daily news topics, which are always political and polarizing. So, or almost always. So So what we want to find is a note that people will see and actually come away informed. If they're going to see it and like they're going to think it's BS, then in some, it's not necessarily worth showing that. And in some ways, it could even risk undermining the system by making it seem biased or something like that. So that's the goal, is like what will be broadly informative if we show it. And we do see notes across a huge range of topics. So like, I don't know all the environmental topics off the top of my head, but certainly there are a lot of notes about chemtrails versus contrails and related things like that. The JAMA study I mentioned was looking at notes on COVID vaccines. And like, so these are super polarizing things that do receive notes. And I think part of the reason that works is that it's not like the system is looking for total consensus. Like everyone is going to think this note is great. Like definitely, some people are not going to like the note, but in most cases, or in many of these cases, probably like 80% of people would look at the note and say like, yeah, that's pretty good. And so a lot of them rate it helpful, and maybe 10% on the edges don't like it. But, we're not going for total unanimity, but we are going for something that will be like broadly informative and not seen as super lopsided.